What do you know about that? Or what have you heard? What do you remember? Even if it's just a little bit.
John, who's the writer,
Yeah.
is the one who is the disciple of Jesus.
Yeah, that John, the one who's writing this, is the one, the disciple whom Jesus loved. Does that raise any thoughts, any questions, any concerns, any problems?
Didn't he love them all?
Yeah, what's with this? Arrogant John?
I love that he calls himself that.
Why?
I don't know.
It just feels really good.
When I see that, it always makes me smile.
And you already answered me. I already asked you. I was going to ask you, which part of it makes you feel good?
That he calls himself the disciple who Jesus loved.
Okay, that John is saying it.
About
Okay.
himself.
All right.
Yeah.
I always think of what took place for him to refer to himself that way.
Okay.
But something took place.
Yeah, why is that?
Yeah.
Why is it that? I don't know if we have a super great answer for that.
Maybe all of them felt that way, they just didn't express
Yeah,
it.
that's
Okay.
He's writing it, and the rest of them, didn't write lots of books.
Okay. Well, Matthew wrote a bunch.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
mean, there's a lot of them that didn't.
Right,
have
right, this is true.
The gospel
Most didn't.
of Bartholomew or something like that.
Yep.
Well, I was gonna say, John went with Jesus as well as Peter and James, but to a lot of places alone with Jesus, those three.
Yeah, there were some certain events
Yeah.
that he got to witness that others didn't, so that seems to put him in a kind of a select group, an inner circle, we often call it. Brandon? So this catches our attention. Yeah, because he could have, to me. I was reclining next to him. He could have said that. That wouldn't have been perceived as arrogant, prideful, just factual, right? The Apostle Paul talks like that all over, right? Talks about himself. All right, there are a number of hands. Jeff is first.
He doesn't say, I'm the only disciple Jesus loves.
Yeah.
Although we tend to take it that way sometimes, even though it doesn't say that at all. You just automatically think that he's just saying, I'm the one. It doesn't say it that way.
You may read a note. Is it the English Standard Version, the ESV, the Lutheran Study Bible? Some of you have that. I think it's there. That it says that John was simply saying that he even loved me. Is that the right? That's the right place, right?
Not a boast that the Lord favored him, but a recognition that the Lord chose to love even him.
Even him. So he really was just, not in a comparative sense, but he was just thinking of me. He even loved me. Yeah.
That humility is not saying his name or I.
Yeah.
And a lot of what John wrote about with Jesus was his great love. That's a lot of his focus.
Yeah.
And so it really spotlights that love rather than himself.
Okay, so a couple things. This kind of goes along with what Brandy was saying. That there's a humility there in not naming himself and not even saying I. It doesn't, in that regard, it doesn't smack of egotism or arrogance at all.
I think that, I think we've talked about this before, that Jesus was a human and he could have had a special power.
Yeah.
What would that take away from anything else? Nothing really. We
Yeah.
all have someone that we can, bounce off of. And
Yeah, so we're saying Jesus, true God and true man, he could have somebody that he was especially close to. What's our fear? What's our fear in that regard? Favoritism. That he would have treated him so much better than everyone else.
You don't hear about that.
Do you see
anymore.
that? No. Yeah, we're talking about Jesus. We screw that up. He did not. But we do talk about this. I told you I love playing darts, so everything is a dartboard analogy. The bullseye. There's Jesus, And the first ring around the bullseye, that's John. He's closest to Jesus. And then the next one out, Peter and James are included. They're the inner circle too. They're close to Jesus. And then there are the 12. And then there are all the disciples. And did Jesus love the whole world? That's all the rest of the dartboard. The part you don't want to hit. You can have a close friend. Jesus could have a close friend, not mess it up. He could have a few guys that he gave a special privilege to see things. That was okay. He loved them all the 12 that he hung around with and beyond that also were there. You also hear about the women who supported him along the way. You know there's a reference like that? Ladies do. Guys maybe not, but yeah, the ladies were supporting him along the way, so they were there, even though you don't get their names all the time, but sometimes. So it didn't affect Jesus in a way that caused him to show favoritism in a sinful way. Obviously, that didn't happen.
This being Monday, Thursday, the next day, Jesus is going to say something that is going to prove to John that he really and truly favored him.
Yeah. What you got in mind, Russ?
If he was hanging on the cross.
Uh-huh. And what did he say?
He said, John, that woman is going to be your mother.
Yeah. So he entrusted his mom, Jesus entrusted his mom to John's care. Impressed upon John that he should care for her. They just had a very close relationship. And Jesus could trust him. We've talked about John. I get confused because I'm teaching John in another Bible class, so I don't know what we've said where. But John talks about, he has common themes. So this love, Kathy was pointing out, he writes about Jesus' love. And he entrusted that message of love to John. And the Spirit gave John the words to write about that. And this is the one Jesus loved. It works together. You can see what God had in mind. And Jesus has his close friend. If you want to look for favoritism, if you want to look for a special gift, a privilege, something, our understanding from history is John is the only one that did not die a martyr's death. And he writes of love, off when he's old. You remember the little Johns, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, where he writes and he talks about my dear children. He talks that way because he's an old guy. And he's talking to churches full of people who are younger than him. He was blessed with that. Special blessing for him. Interesting person, John. And that's the person that's closest to Jesus. It's his best friend. If you want to call it best friend, he's his best friend.
We're talking about our fear. We see everything through the lens of sin.
Yep.
We know that we have a hard time having a friend without slighting someone else, a good friend without slighting other people, or we just have these issues. It's kind of like when we heard about Jesus telling his mother when he was 12, "Don't you know I will be in my Father's house?" We kind of go, "Oh gosh, that sounds so disrespectful," because that's our sinful nature.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. We kind of see it through a lens of sinfulness. If Nancy's my best friend, that means Sally isn't. Sorry, Sally. I like you all, but Nancy. We look at it that way, and then people go, wait a minute, he just talked about Nancy and Sally, then where am I? And so we think it's all bad. This is going to go wrong. He likes them more. He's going to favor them. You know, this happens. That's how we see things. Unless we're more mature. And in some cases, when you're talking church relationships, more sanctified. Right? People can have close friends. Stop getting worked up about it. Doesn't mean they hate you. They probably love you. We're going to talk about that, I think. Yeah, I hope at some point we'll talk about that in Christian love. If we're worked up about that, we're probably worked up about the wrong stuff. Unless somebody's really been sinful and given you a reason to think otherwise. This is the way we are. It's kind of, I think it's part of the human makeup. You end up being close to somebody. Here's the telling question. You're going to tell on yourself, some of you. How many of you have friends that you feel closer to than family members? You feel closer to some friends than you do some of your family? A lot. That's pretty common. Or at least that one family member. We all have one, right?
Be careful.
Or two, or seven, or eight. Yeah, it shouldn't be the one sitting next to you, Sandy. That one should be your friend. Best friend. Yeah. So Jesus had a best friend. He had an inner circle of friends. He loved John. He loved the 3. He loved the 12. He loved them all. He loved the world. He could do that perfectly, thankfully. And if we mess that up along the way, then we beg for his forgiveness and forgiveness of others. And then we get at it the right way.
I'm thinking of that circle of friendship that you were talking about, and you think of the first 2 disciples who ran to the tomb, John and Peter.
Yeah. Yeah, there's all sorts of them. So you can, we already did it, right? We're past most, well, not all of it. We're past some of it where you can see just John, or just Peter and John, or Peter, James and John, select groups. We're past a lot of that in our study, but there's still another one coming. So watch out for that. But don't be worried about it. Don't be troubled by it. So in that section, just following there, deals with Judas, right? And Peter motioned to this disciple. We're going to pick apart where they were sitting and how the table was configured and all of that. It's kind of interesting. We may not get all the answers we want, but it's pretty interesting. And it kind of puts this into a different kind of light. But at any rate, Peter is asking John, who is he talking about? The one that's going to betray him. Peter wants to know. And he asks John, why? Why does he ask John?
He's sitting the closest.
He's sitting the closest, and we just talked about this.
He is his best friend.
He's closest to Jesus. He's physically and emotionally, right? He's the best friend, and he's right next to Jesus. That's who he would ask.
Chances are Jesus would fill in and nobody else.
More than likely, it seems. So Peter wants, and surprised that Peter wants to know. Hey, what's going on? Peter.
They might also think that John actually knows too. I mean, if he's that close with Jesus to begin with,
Yeah.
he might already.
He's already got an idea.
Yeah.
So he wants to know, they want to know. Jesus actually answers, it's the one I give this piece of bread, this tiny bit of bread, this piece, and dip it in the dish. He does that, he gives it to Judas. That's the signal for the person. And it says, as soon as Judas took the bread, Satan entered him. Thoughts about that part? That could raise some questions or comment.
Weren't we talking a couple weeks ago about Judas and how Jesus kept giving him a chance? And it doesn't sound, here it makes it sound more final, or like almost like the hardening of the heart, or
Yeah.
something like that, where Satan entered him and his chances are kind of gone.
It's escalated, right? We talked about this a bit when we talked about Spy Wednesday, if you want to call it Spy Wednesday, the day we think he maybe made the deal with the religious leaders. So we did talk about that, how Satan influenced Judas to do that. Now it says this, right? That's what we're saying. You have that idea that Satan was behind him pushing, and this seems to kind of escalate it a bit, or that he moved him. Demon possession, it doesn't sound the same as what we're familiar with demon possession in biblical accounts or what we know today. It doesn't sound like that, but what does it mean? Just that Satan, again, is making a push on Judas, and yeah.
If you're not for Jesus, you would kind of be for Satan. I mean, it's kind of a...
Yeah, but there seems to be a higher degree here because he's motivated to go against him. Not just to, not before him. But this is like an active, right? So there is something exceptional about this. However we can assimilate this, understand this, it's become something more right now.
His personal greed was in before, and now he's really on the evil
Yeah.
because Satan is guiding him.
So since Satan had received the curse from God in the Garden of Eden and knew what was going to happen, I'm a little surprised that he would push for it, knowing that this was at the point where God was going to defeat him, or Jesus was going to defeat him. Or
Bring
was
up
he
a
just
good
arrogant?
question.
Was he just arrogant?
Well,
enough?
yes. And, it brings up the question, what does Satan know?
But he knew what the curse, I mean, he knew, God told him, and he knew who Jesus was. So, you would think he could put two and two together,
But did he know this is the end?
Well, I mean, how often did he think Jesus was going to come to earth?
Well, but there's a difference between now and the wilderness temptations, right?
Right.
3 years,
Right.
3-year difference. So did he think
Oh.
of then? You know what I mean?
But I mean, if he was
always
pushing
special.
Judas to betray him, did he, that's where I'm like, okay, it kind of gives you the impression that, okay, if Judas betrays him and he goes through,
Satan's an opportunist,
okay.
right?
Yeah, true.
And if this seemed like the good thing to do at the time, I think that that's the way he operates.
Yeah.
He sees a chink in your armor at a particular time, he drives for it. That's the way and finally, this is what happened.
Right, well,
Whether I can sort it out or not, or
Right.
you can sort it out, it is what happened. Kathy, was your hand up before? Was that-
I was just gonna say, Satan is clear, and he wouldn't maybe see that because he'd still be looking at, I'm better than God.
Yeah.
You know, he had that as his idea.
Yeah. How he thinks, when he acts, he's a whole different mindset than
Well, and just to go with that, there were a lot of things that were happening between now and Jesus' death where Jesus might have been like, okay, forget this. You know, it was gonna be a tough time,
Yeah,
so.
and in Satan's, again, I don't know that he knew all the details exactly, but looking for those chances to get him to stop.
Right. The other thing I was gonna say was the whole thing of either Jesus sharing the bread, or I think in another account is them dipping together. That's a real kind of special type of thing to have a meal with someone and going with what Debbie said, this kind of like the last, come on, we're close, I love you, are you really gonna do this? And then when he decided,
We will be talking, the positions at the table have something to do with that, and I think it does reveal the Lord's grace to the very end with Judas. Randy, was your hand up before? That is, it is.
Even though he may know what's gonna happen.
It's who he is. Yeah, yeah.
It says too that Jesus was troubled in spirit, so he may have just wanted to, he knew it was gonna happen, let's just get on with this.
It is interesting that he says, I know there are some other hands, we might have to go backwards a little bit, but what you're about to do quickly. Jesus knows. He knows, and he sends him off to do it. That does get our attention, doesn't it? You might be thinking ahead already some hours where he's praying in the garden to his Father, saying what? Take this from me. If there's another way to accomplish the salvation of the world, let's do that. Can we do that? So here, hours before, he sends Judas, the betrayer, out to do the work, to get ready for his crucifixion. Troubled in spirit, do you think? Put yourself in his spot, if you can. We get bothered about far less. He's truly got the weight of the world on him. And he says this, and he sends him out. He knows, I don't want to get too far ahead of the discussion of it, but he puts Judas right there. And then he sends him out.
I actually think that there's a little bit of another testament to his love right here too, though, because we look at the fact that he tells everybody, it's the one I'm going to dip the bread, I'm going to give it to that person, and that's the one who's the betrayer. And moments later, he does it right then and there, and the others at the table don't realize what he's just done.
Yeah.
And he sends them away, and they think that he's just going to get more bread. And I think that there's a veil that occurs that he has given them to so there's not a persecution on the spot. So they don't try to stop Judas. They don't try to stop what needs to be done. But also means there's not condemnation of Judas at the time because he's doing his part, whether he wants to do it or not, whether it's the
He wanted to.
well.
There is a sinful part. I mean, we don't want to make him into a robot that God controlled and then sent
Right,
out,
sure,
right?
sure.
Just a caution.
Okay. But I think that is a show of love as well. Because I think
very right.
I mean, there's a good chance that Peter, knowing that, might have tried to kill him right then and there.
You are dealing with Peter, aren't you?
Exactly.
Wait, would he do something like that? Would he take us? Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Flowers.
flowers, he might just do that, something like that.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Were there other hands? I think I missed Lori.
It seems the devil is always out to end in death. So he's maybe even thinking that Jesus' ministry and everything can end in death. And so he's just pushing everything to death. I mean, anything in the Bible, it's always ends in death. And death is his final.
He wants it a step further too, though. He wants to make sure that there's betrayal of God, so that when there is death,
Yeah.
he has company. Right?
Also, Satan might have been looking at, I've accomplished something because I've deceived one of your children.
Yeah, he's all out for the power and the glory. That's why he was in the situation he is in to this day, right? He was trying to rebel against God himself. So, yeah, let's talk a minute about what the other disciples were thinking. Anything there raise a question? There are two things to
Back a little bit. There are usage, when you hear this, there are usage today between like and love. We may like somebody, but we love somebody. I guess my mind goes back, and I have to look at it. I don't know. Is the word like used at times? Like we use something, like we like ice cream.
Yeah, yeah.
Love.
No, they're different. The difference, I'm trying to think of a word for like, but what they do is use different forms of the word love, for sure. The friendship kind, the self-sacrificing kind, the intimate kind. There's all different words for that. Yeah, this one is that closeness. So what about what the disciples thought?
Well, first of all, most of them may not have known what John asked Jesus. He
Yeah.
might have whispered it, and they wouldn't have known that what Jesus was doing
Yeah.
was in response to that question.
This is where you get into who was sitting where,
Yeah.
what was heard.
I'm always surprised about the going to give something to the poor, because I kind of picture Judas as just being this evil guy the whole time.
Okay, but yeah, let's talk about, this is one of the 2 points I think that there are in here at least. The giving to the poor, that's what they thought, right? That was an option. Maybe he's going to give something to the poor.
Well, that was one of the things Jews did on holidays.
That what?
Jews did on holidays.
Yes, I want to make sure you didn't say Judas.
No,
Jews.
Jews.
Jews, yeah, they did this. It was actually a custom. There was a custom to do this. So that's a natural thought in their head. And why would they think that Judas would do that? He's the treasurer. He's the money guy. He held the money. It was his job, it was his function. Why might that surprise you, though, still, that they thought this?
He was also very greedy. I mean, it's mentioned in other parts that he didn't like to part with the money.
Yeah, did they, I'm thinking of one, did you remember one?
Was it the feeding of the 5,000 where he was concerned about buying bread for the whole thing?
No, that was somebody else.
That was,
When Mary poured the nard on his
yeah.
feet.
Yeah, that expensive perfume, the kind probably that was in a bottle where you had to, break the top off, so, I mean, you're gonna use it all. Yeah, that could have been given to the poor, and they, Judas wasn't alone. I'm pretty sure it says there that the other disciples were saying it also, one of the other accounts, so. But Judas had this idea, that money could have been used to, at that time, give to the poor, that was what they said. So there was this giving to help others, that was part of the Jewish culture and tradition, right? This is what they did it at festival times. Judas had the money, even though there was that little glitch before where they weren't understanding what was being done to anoint Jesus. They still did this, and Judas would be a natural to go out and do that at this time. So it's reasonable that they would think that. What about the other part of that? What was the other option?
Buy something to the feast.
Buy more food for the, well, it says to buy what was needed for the feast. So how do you take that? You understand it? You're remembering what we're talking about? It's kind of hard to keep it all in. Maybe?
It sounded like what they were doing then was not quite to the main part of the feast.
Yeah, so how do you make sense of that? Because it actually doesn't say more, right? If you insert the word more, you're saying they're running low, they need a little bit more for it. But I don't think that's what they mean. What would they mean?
Well, the feast lasted more than just one day, it was 7.
Yeah. Do you remember this part? We talked, it really, it's hard to keep all of this straight. But you had the Passover feast, and then started the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which lasted 7 days. It used to be flip-flopped. We talked about that a little bit. And so they kind of melded into one over time. So yeah, so the custom now was really one big long thing. It started with preparing on Wednesday. Did I say that right? Yeah. I get my own timeline where they're preparing and then celebrating after 6 o'clock. It becomes Thursday. So the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Things are going to shut down because the Passover is coming. So then they can't do business. So there's a small time frame in which to get stuff to continue the celebration over the Passover weekend. And so there's probably some things still open, some merchants still selling, and this would be, again, a very natural thought on the disciples' part. Oh, he's getting some stuff for the feast, stuff that's going to start tomorrow. That's probably what they're thinking. Natural thoughts make sense to them, so they weren't all privy to what was going on, or thinking it all through anyway. What do we got, a few minutes? Handful? Let's take a look at the next section. It's not that long, but it may have a lot of discussion. When he was gone, Judas, Jesus said, "Now is the Son of Man glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will glorify the Son in himself, and will glorify him at once." It's a lot of glorifying. "My children, I will be with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and just as I told the Jews, so I tell you now, where I am going, you cannot come. A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this all men will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." Simon Peter asked him, "Lord, where are you going?" Jesus replied, "Where I am going, you cannot follow now, but you will follow later." Peter asked, "Lord, why can't I follow you now? I will lay down my life for you." Then Jesus answered, "Will you really lay down your life for me? I tell you the truth, before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. Just hold on right there. The little line says we're done reading. First paragraph. Comments, questions? The whole part about the glorifying, what's he getting at? What's he talking about? Son of now is the Son of Man. Might be your cue. Now is the Son of Man glorified. God is glorified. What's the now? sounds like a silly question, but.
Just passion and doubt.
Yeah, it's the whole thing. It's not this second, this moment. It's not Judas leaving and now me talking. It's not now, like this second. It's what's going to happen now. Now I am going to be glorified. It's going to be obvious that I and the Father are one and share that glory.
I was gonna say, what God sent me in the world to do
Yep.
is going to happen.
Yep, you're going to see the Father's plan played out, and it doesn't look glorious on the outside, but it is.
Pastor,
Yep.
that last sentence in the paragraph preceding 31, I see such a distinction where it says, and it was night, total darkness, and then Jesus, the light in the darkness, even
Yeah.
what he talks about. Wow, here I am, I'm going to shine brightly
Yeah.
in spite of it.
Yeah. Interesting thought. Yeah. Remember that for a sermon sometime. He tells them, I'll only be with you a little longer. The discussion where I'm going, you cannot come, and what follows there, what's he mean? What can you explain about that?
Well, he will be going to heaven, right? He's going to die. I mean, he first goes into hell, but he will be in heaven. They're not going to follow him there immediately.
Okay, not immediately. What
My,
else?
my personal life is going to end, but my spiritual life is
Okay.
going to go on.
All right, I think there's another part too, Mark.
This time to teach is growing, is disappearing.
Only a little longer. But he says, where I'm going, you cannot come. Where are you going? Where I'm going, you can't follow, but you will follow later. It's the cross, it's the suffering, it's everything, heaven ultimately. But it's all of that.
But eventually, that persecution would come to them.
Yeah, that's what he's getting at too. It's not just the glory of heaven that will eventually be theirs like it will be his. It's the suffering, it's the death, it's the persecution. Like I said, John, who's writing this, is the only guy, if tradition holds, that didn't suffer a martyr's death. They would be killed for their faith. They would do, but not right then. Peter said, well, I'll do that. I'll do what, he didn't know what that was. He had no idea, but you just sit there and you go, oh, Peter. But wait, there's a couple other guys where you're gonna go, oh, Thomas, oh, Philip. Don't make it just out to be Peter, but it is Peter. Why can't I'll lay down my life for you? Will you really?
I think of it too as, this is the work that he's doing and no one else can. This is
Yeah.
the work.
Yeah.
And you cannot be a part of your redemption. You are not going to be saving me.
Or anyone
I'm
else.
saving you.
Yeah,
This
they
is
couldn't
mine.
do what he's going to do. Even if they would have, even if Peter would have protected Jesus, and they would have got one of the other guys, John, they would have gotten John, and crucified John as an example for all these followers of Jesus. We'll find that Jesus, but we got John. We'll put him up on the cross. Even that wouldn't have been doing what Jesus would ultimately do, because it wouldn't be the same. It would be a sinful guy dying at the hands of the government. That's all that would be. Nothing else. But Jesus' death, they could not, and his sacrifice for sin, they could not accomplish. They could not do that. But in a sense, they would do something very similar, because they would die at the hands of others because of their faith in God. So that part is right. We really are not going to get to talk about the love of, I'm not totally shocked. Don't get the idea that I'm shocked that we're not getting to talk about it. But what I do want to spend some time talking about is the name Maundy Thursday. Okay? And you know, a lot of you know what that is. It's here. This is why it gets its name in this section. So we're going to return to this, and we're going to talk about loving one another and some of what that means, among us as a congregation. So that's next week. We get 2 in a row.